Rimworld's third expansion, Biotech, just released. Before that though, the patch to go alongside the expansion, 1.4, made its way onto Steam as the unstable branch. So if you've been here before, you'll know that I've played quite a bit of heavily modded Rimworld lately. From factory building with VFE mechanoids to surviving the onslaught of Winston Wave with combat extended. I thought it would be nice to load up 1.4 completely vanilla and just have a totally normal and relaxed playthrough. With that in mind, I set Randy to Strive to Survive difficulty, since that's usually not too crazy an experience, except for sometimes when it is, but we'll just have to wait and see. My location of choice was here, on the coast of Gore Lake, which seems nice. And my ideology is incredibly moderate. Nothing of real note here other than the fact that organ harvesting and everything that comes with it is totally acceptable. I kept the auto-generated name for it, Zootin Creed, because to be honest I couldn't come up with anything better. No one here is particularly special. Colt, Miles and Blitz. They can basically fumble their way through everything as a collective, but when it comes to doing anything social, well, the three of them share a single brain cell on that front, unfortunately. And we're starting with absolutely nothing here, just for a bit of extra challenge, but we're in a lovely temperate forest with a very comfy yearly temperature range. There is a winter, but it's not overly harsh. I ordered some trees cut down and the gang built a quick shelter onto some ruins. Having no food, some of the local alpacas had to be culled using 2 hastily prepared shortbows. Then, with bellies full of raw alpaca meat, some small fields were sown in the nearby patch of rich soil. Rimworld decided the faction name should be Nation of Dosholium, which I thought was quite nice but not all the way there. I made it a bit more me by lopping the end off, leaving Nation of Dosh. And then, rather unceremoniously, I named the settlement Moist Hole, which is just a nice mental image. With 3 starting colonists, you can make this very convenient little vortex of beds. However, Blitz is actually a night owl, so to keep him happy, he's got to be up and about whilst everybody else sleeps, which isn't ideal in a bed vortex situation, which is a very roundabout way of saying I made Blitz his own bedroom so that he can night owl around in peace. One of the various changes to come in 1.4 that I'm sort of embarrassingly excited about is the fact that shelves can now hold 3 stacks of varying items, and that their settings can be linked with other shelves. To test this out, I made a barn to store rice in. It wouldn't be used as rice storage for all that long, because I'd soon build a fridge, but still. Very cool. Shelves are good. A couple of days into the playthrough, and this is what the settlement looks like. It's a bit odd, but I like it. Nothing all that interesting has happened yet, because Randy is taking his time, it seems. The first event we get is a group of refugees. None of them have any skills of note, but hands are hands. Not that Rimworld pawns actually have hands. Anyway, I put them to work, and together we built a big long wooden fridge, a neat little temple, and started to work on building walls around the settlement. Randy finally did send a raid, but it's just a single dude called Panda. He attacked on a foggy night, so I sent over one of the refugees to have a go in melee whilst Blitz and Colt hide behind trees. But what's this? Foul goings on in the night. Betrayal most vile. The traitors were driven off, but at some expense to the health of the colonists, all of whom were injured but none grievously. It's good practice to disarm any refugees you take in for exactly this reason, but of course they can just pick up a weapon as Elamos kindly demonstrated here. It wasn't that hard of a fight since 2 of the traitors were trapped in separate buildings, meaning I got to take them one by one. But I only have 2 combatants myself since Miles is incapable of violence. Anyway, with them dealt with, I made a small prison cell for an unfortunate named Tomboy who crashed here in a transport pod. She's old and frail, but good at mining, among a couple of other things. Worth the hassle of converting and recruiting, I figured. Then we had a second set of refugees. Just 2 this time, Sonia and Cave, so I took them in because surely I can't be betrayed twice in a row, and they're both quite high level in social, which I desperately need here, so it would be nice to try and get one of them to join. And sure enough, Cave did offer to join. He's also old and wonky like Tomboy, but I accepted because, like I said, I need him. Of course, though, he's not a follower of our ideology, Zootin Creed, which means he can't put his grand social capabilities to use converting prisoners until he himself had been converted first. The solution in my head was just to make Miles the moral guide of the colony despite her complete lack of social skills, and then just hope for successful conversion rituals. It's worth mentioning as well that Cave is basically a stereotypical retired soldier coming back for one last mission. Having been a military recruit and then a destroyer general, the description of that backstory doesn't make it clear whether he was the general aboard a destroyer, or the version that I prefer, where he was just a very destructive general. Either way, he knows how to clap some cheeks, assuming he can shuffle his way to the front lines in time. Another of 1.4's features is painting. You can paint walls, floors, and certain buildings now. So naturally, my first instinct was to paint a checkerboard pattern onto the kitchen floor. Very good. I had by this point, through random events, got myself a breeding pair of alpacas. It'd be nice to lean quite hard into these, both as a source of wool for trade and meat to help feed the colony. It's been a really long time since I had properly large numbers of animals in Rimworld. The rancher playstyle always seems to take too long to get off the ground when you're trying to force it from the beginning, so it was nice to have it here in an already semi-established colony. As winter started to sweep across the land, I got to test the basic little defensive structure I was building. Something of a proto-kill box. I had made my 3 shooters machine pistols by this point, so I figured I wouldn't have any trouble against 3 melee raiders. And sure, they were dealt with, but look how far Marjot made it with that knife. I'm used to combat extended, in which the moment they stepped into the open they'd have been either exsanguinated or got very scared and ran around in a panic. It's easy to forget that in vanilla Rimworld, enemy combatants behave more like Terminators than people, marching unflinchingly to their targets until they're either killed or disabled. But anyway, at this point I think the colony looks quite nice. We've got a large pasture, a couple of individual homes, a functioning fridge and kitchen, the beginnings of a workshop, and then the classic combo rec room, barracks and laboratory. Now I know there'll be some of you that look at these mismatched floors and retch, incapable of comprehending the madness that could lead to such a construction. I have nothing to say that could comfort you. I only hope that you can forgive me and hold on for now. I promise it's fixed eventually, but it takes a really long time. Around this time I'm thinking more about painting. The place is looking quite naturalistic to me, so I paint the temple's walls a deep forest green. But sadly I can't just fling paint around with total reckless abandon because you actually do have to provide dye for it, which you get from harvesting Tinctoria. The next interesting thing to happen was another transport pod crash, containing Zebo, who just happens to be the son of our current prisoner Tomboy. What a fairy tale coincidence that is, so go on Zebo, in you get, go join your mum. Then came yet more refugees. This is getting a little old now, Randy, let's switch things up a bit. I took them in anyway because that's just the kind of guy I am. Another pair of workers are welcome, and if they do betray me, at this point I think it'd be pretty easy to deal with. And just after letting them in I was dropped some rewards from the last set of refugees. 2 advanced components and a pair of skill trainers. 1 for animals and 1 for social. Nice. I had Miles huff the social trainer, which took her to level 6, and stashed the animal one away for later. And by this point we'd finally convinced Tomboy to leave her son behind in the prison cell and join the colony after a very long conversion process by Miles, bringing us up to 5 colonists. So Randy must have been listening, because then he sent a string of 3 raids in immediate succession over the course of about 10 minutes. None of them caused any real problems, but the last got pretty close thanks to the small trap hallway I had built so far being exhausted by the first 2 raids. The next little while was spent developing the colony further. For starters, I had underestimated the amount of space I needed, especially if I want a large pasture like this. The solution was to tunnel through this large hill at its thinnest point and wall it off, creating an additional little chunk of space to fill with stuff and things. I also needed to start making some silver, so I made these growing zones for smoke leaf and hops. Because doobs and beer seems like it could make a good combo deal to sell to orbital traders and passing caravans in large quantities. And then the goose arrived. All hail the Unity Goose! Worship the Golden Goose! Subscribe and smash that bell! The goose demands it! The prophecy states that true believers in the goose will be rewarded with riches beyond their wildest imaginings. Now, I never really went for that sort of thing before, but you can't really argue with a golden meteor landing inside your walls. And funnily enough, gold was exactly what the colony needed too. I hadn't come across any until now, meaning I had been locked out of the back half of the research tree because you need just a little bit to make a multi-analyzer. I thought it would be fun to doll up the kill box a little, and I started to paint industrial black and yellow danger stripes onto the ground. And as you can see by this point, there are some turrets in place too. But the kill box is a bit small and crap, so it is working for now, but it's definitely not a long-term solution. It got tested by a larger raid for a rewarded combat quest, with a Psylink Neuroformer as the reward, which I used on Colt. You don't get to see that though, because it was early in the morning and apparently I didn't hit the record button hard enough. Luckily for you, I realised and started recording just before I wasted a load of silver on a hospital. I know you don't have to have the whole floor covered in sterile tiles, but in some things I like uniformity. Though evidently that preference is applied rather selectively. Anyway, another colonist joined, Purple, who was a wild man that I tamed using an inspiration. They were sent straight into the temple to be converted, and would you look at that, got them done in one. By now the colony was starved on some resources and piling up a few too many of others, so I was glad to finally see a bulk good trader and picked up a load of components and medicine, in exchange for a heap of random leather, drugs and beer. Now I'm sure everyone will have different ideas of the game's many stages, but to me this feels like the beginning of mid-game Rimworld. The only thing holding me back right now was weather. I didn't realise this place was so cold. Growing in winter is quite a lot less reliable than I'd expected. Oh, just to cut in, by the way, some of the recordings here don't have game sound, because I'm a big dumb. Even though I explicitly stated that this is a no dumb area, and not to dumb here. So sorry, I'll try and make it up to you somehow. Anyway, yeah, growing winter, etc, etc. I wanted to start making hydroponics, but wouldn't have enough power yet, so once more I expanded out a section of the wall to enclose another steam geyser for a third geothermal generator. There are two others on the map that I'll get to eventually, but these three are the ones I feel like I can reasonably enclose within the settlement's walls at the moment. And hey, here's another raid, which introduces another of 1.4's new features. Unwaveringly loyal pawns, who can be captured but never recruited. Now, remember much earlier on when I was introducing the concepts of zooting creed? Ah yeah, organ harvesting. So shortly after that raid, a combat supplier was more than happy to take their organs off my hand for a total of 2,177 silver, with which I bought a charge rifle and a set of prestige recon armor for Colt. And then we had a big old party to celebrate. You might notice though that things are a little bit green right now. There's been toxic fallout over the area for a few days now. When it finally subsides, it leaves the area completely barren, which is the kick up the arse that finally got me to start to prioritise hydroponics. The animals are starving and there's almost nothing left in storage for the humans either. Just as that was getting started though, a siege. Very exciting. I'm fairly confident because at this point I've got a pretty well armed little group on the go, so I sent the gang out to go and engage the camp before they could get properly set up. We took a few hits, but no one was even downed, easy. Alright, with that problem solved and the toxic fallout leaving just in time for winter to give way to spring, it should be a good time to develop, just as soon as we clean up this little infestation here in the strip mines. I didn't exactly play this smartly, rushing ahead before everyone had shown up, but it's fine, it worked out. Sometimes it is actually about the destination and not the journey. I've got quite a sizable herd by this point, including a number of boomalopes which have been supplying plenty of chem fuel. However, I learned that when you slaughter them, they explode. For some reason I thought it was safe to do that. With that in mind, at the first opportunity I flogged them to an exotic goods trader. The idea of creating a danger pen out in the wastes full of boomalopes is an interesting idea, but not one I want to go for right now. In return for the explosive herd, I bought a load of components and a bionic eye to replace one of Colt's, which had a scratch scar from a rat on it. And now came two weather controller events at the same time. One of them was just a random event and had a small mech cluster guarding it, and the other was from a quest, which was guarded by tribals. I took the tribal one because it came with Bednall, who will make a fine cleaner, but also because it meant the fog from that weather controller would overwrite the thunderstorm from the mechanoid one. So I tamed a group of horses to make the expeditions to the weather controllers faster and got on with it. First to the mech one, which went, well, Green lost a leg, but we got him. The tribal one, for obvious reasons, was considerably simpler, so we stole their bedrolls and carried Green home to have a new leg glued on. And since at this point I can fairly reliably buy advanced components, I also stuck a bionic spine into Tomboy to replace her aged and decrepit one. And speaking of old and decrepit, I also stuck Cave into a biosculptor for age reversal. He's frail, so I thought this might help. However, I learned that I actually have to run him through a bioregeneration cycle for this, which takes about 20 days and resolves 1 permanent injury, of which Cave has 3, so we'll get around to that. Overall though, Randy has been very kind so far, and allowed me to develop a really nice little settlement. Everyone is really happy, and we've even got a pet bear, because for some reason Colt keeps getting inspired taming. I think that a large raid would absolutely wipe the place out, but thus far at least Randy has been merciful. What does keep happening though is Green keeps losing legs. She lost another one fighting off an infestation, so I strapped a boring regular prosthetic on for now until I can put a bionic one in its place. Did I ever introduce Green? I can't even remember where they came from at this point, to be honest. Maybe they just popped out of the ground and joined the colony at some point. In any case, their legs keep falling off. The reason they didn't get a bionic is because I'd just spent my advanced components making an arm for Cave, so that I could throw him in for bioregeneration and make him whole again. But I did wait quite some time for that because I had a load of raids incoming from quests and needed him here to help fight them off. Tomboy was becoming the settlement's premier melee combatant, so I bought her a plasma sword from a combat merchant and had a shield belt made. At the same time, I was getting the place ready to embrace the trappings of royalty, deciding that I'd have Colt pursue the Royal Ascent ending. I made 2 big and tasty bedrooms down here and set aside this corner for later use as a throne room. And you'll notice that I have some extra faces up there at the top. I'd accepted a quest to hold a prisoner and fight off 2 large tribal raids. The rewards are a load of pieces of Eltec's gear, and I get those 3 to help out in the meantime, which was very convenient when a mech cluster landed. One of those dumb clusters that gives you a covered approach and a wall to hide behind, but nonetheless the combat filled the hospital and left some scars. Unlike the first of the 2 tribal raids, which was predictably very easily defended, helped in part by the fact that there was an infestation sitting outside of the entrance that they ran straight into. That infestation was only there because of another quest I had accepted that rewarded some honour and a psychic reader, which would go into Cave's head to help us get better trade prices. After those 2 combats, I thought we'd best throw a quick party to keep everyone's spirits up whilst waiting for the second lot of tribals. Before that though came a mech hive raid, the first few members of which barreled through all of my expensive and time-consuming granite traps. The raid itself was surprisingly easy and I don't think anyone even took a hit. I wish the mechanoids would attack like that more often. But I had to replace all the traps with wood so that they could be built before the second wave of tribals, who came and unsurprisingly fell down like the first wave. So now Colt got to become a yeoman. Apparently the ceremony was very impressive because he was immediately eligible for Acolyte too, but that required a throne room, which was still in construction. I got to put Colt and his special psychic brain to the test with an infestation, during which he stunned a whole lot of bugs. He also has an area of effect blind ability, which is very useful but sometimes hard to line up in melee combat because it also affects allies. Now I'm glad I never put any time into Vanilla Psycasts Expanded, because I'm sure if I had this would all seem very tame by comparison, but I'm enjoying myself. As soon as the throne room was good enough, I called those cloaked weirdos back to give Colt his rank of Acolyte. This ceremony was deemed grandiose, which gave him another 2 honour. Very good. At this point I'm just on the hunt for honour wherever I can find it to try and get Colt leveled up enough to be whisked away by the Imperium. So when a tribute collector came and I happened to have 2 prisoners in the jail, I gave one of them away for 3 honour. The other one though I wanted, Callie. He's iron-willed, which obviously I want, but it makes converting a bit of a pain. The answer to that though is a masterful conversion ritual, and this is when you're glad you made a good temple. At this point I figure it's safe to send Cave into the Bacta tank, Biosculptor, to get rid of that pesky frail debuff over a long 20 days. So say goodbye to Cave, everyone. Bye Cave, see you in a month. Soon after that I get another mech cluster, which allows me to test out Colt's ability to call in some marines. They were very helpful, and with much psycasting we defeated the cluster, at the cost of a full hospital and one of Tomboy's legs. That's fine though, she's destined to be fully bionic anyway. we'll just gloss over the fact that she came extremely close to death and had to be sewn back together in the rain on the way back to the hospital. She made it there, that's all that matters. Again, destination, not journey, sometimes. Now is around the time in the playthrough that I start to really speedrun the royalty stuff. I'm looking at my notes and realising quite how long this video is going to be, so what comes next is basically just a series of quests with honour as their reward. I took on 2 construction quests at the same time, setting Cave and Miles to the endless task of producing stone blocks, whilst pretty much everybody else went to put those blocks into the ground. After finishing the first quest, Colt was made Praetor. Cool, but not cool enough. After finishing the second construction, he was ready for the title of Baron. However, his throne room was not. It needed more finery, so there, finery added. At some point around here in the middle of all this questing, someone called Evans drops from the sky, paralytic. Whatever, get into a hospital bed and you can help out later. The next 2 quests are an infestation and a crashed shuttle. The infestation is right by this door down here, so it's pretty easily handled. At this point, Tomboy can hold down a doorway real good, especially with Colt just standing there and perma-stunning everything he can see. The crashed shuttle was being attacked by tribals, so that was fine as well, but annoyingly, after dealing with that, Colt was left at 19 honour of the required 20 for the final title of Count. And so we wait for another quest. And while we wait, the extremely rude Night Pikes drop podded onto the fucking TV. Oh, they also killed Zebo, but no one really liked him all that much anyway, except for Tomboy, who's his mother. She was actually pretty upset about this. Anyway, the last quest we'd have to do came in, and it was just to hold 2 prisoners for 15 days. I would have preferred something a bit more immediate, but okay, fine, simple enough. While I was waiting, I worked on the various conditions I'd need to meet for Colt's ascension to Count of the Broken Empire, and the Royal Ascent quest that comes with it. Firstly, this second large bedroom needed to be made worthy of the Stellarch, which meant fine flooring and a royal bed. The throne room needed some upgrades as well. It was basically just too small to make impressive enough for the rank of Count, so I had to extend it a touch in the corner here. And then I stuck a piano in it. And I rather like this procession of duck statues that line the entry too. So with that, everything is in place and ready for the last little push to the end. So here's a final good look at the base. I think it's pretty nice. The large indoor section down here with all the fancy stuff, and then a more outdoorsy green space over here, and that terrible kill box that really isn't good enough to have lasted this long. It followed my usual methodology for base building, which is just to say chuck a new bit on whenever I need something else. I very rarely plan a base, preferring usually to just work in whatever way comes naturally to me in the moment. I think that suits Rimworld quite well. If I were building a mega late game compound for a gang of bionic super warriors, then okay, sure. Large square rooms and efficient pathways it is. But something like this shows its progression in its unusual shapes and tacked on compartments, and I like that. So, now the rest is a shitfest. When you start the Royal Ascent quest, just like with Ship to the Stars, a constant onslaught of raids start, until a royal shuttle arrives to take you away to space with the Stellarch. So what follows is an incredibly botched and shitty series of defensive actions. Firstly, we have a mech hive, which runs straight into a very large infestation that I've been growing at the entrance for quite some time now, just leaving me to deal with the rest of the infestation, which with the help of the Stellarch's fighters is pretty easy but far from fully painless. Then came a simple pirate raid, which went about as well as they could have expected it to, followed immediately by another large tribal raid. This is easy, I thought to myself, blissfully unaware of the horrors yet to come. The horrors yet to come were what felt like an unending series of breaching raids, all slightly overlapping with each other. Most of this should have been pretty easy, but this is Rimworld. People are getting grouchy, there isn't much food left. The raiders keep messing with the power supply, and Tomboy has dementia, which unfortunately doesn't make her forget about her dead son. I had to keep a constant joy fuzz on her from Colt just to keep her from having mental breaks. The parties help though as well. The parties always help. A great number of samey combats later, just a day from the shuttle's arrival, those Night Pike kids drop way up here and set up for a siege. So we go out to face them in the field, and I had been holding on to all of Colt's various aid calls this whole time. But since this was likely to be the last chance to use them, I called in a squad of cataphracts to have a go at the siege. They didn't do much, to be honest, but they did get their attention and cause them to rush our position. After killing them, all that was left to do was wait. And finally, after quite a few hours, the shuttle arrives. along with another raid, but that doesn't matter. They can have the place. We don't need it anymore. We're off to snort Glitter World grade yayo off the ass of a space whore. So, that was my exploration of 1.4 before the release of Biotech today. Or whenever it was released if you're watching this in the future. If you are watching this in the future, then at least we made it that far. But for now we can't be so sure. Remain indoors, close your curtains, and enjoy Biotech. It looks rad, and I can't wait to get my grubby little paws on it. Until next time, thank you for watching. Goodbye.